days left here in the new year, and we're going to go ahead and continue on with our Bible reading series. Now, before we pick up where we left off, I thought it might be interesting to just dive into one of the more identifying features of this specific Bible, which is some of the archaeology information. I mean, that's kind of its calling card, is this archaeology portion here, being a study Bible. And if anybody was wondering, it's the English Standard Version. I don't necessarily have a preference one way or another. I grew up with a few different versions. Some people adhere to like the old school King James Version. I don't know if I'd go that far, but this has been one that I've had for several years and that has served me pretty well. But what I wanted to talk about in regards to the archaeology portion is I thought it would be interesting to unpack a couple things. One being some of the archaeological discoveries that supplement biblical accounts, and then beyond that, also the outline of the book of Genesis, because for anybody who's following along to this point, they might be saying, well, what comes next? Or what can we expect? A lot of times I like to know what's going to come next. I mean, that's the whole point of chapters in the front page of the book. You want to know what's coming. But one thing at a time. We'll go discoveries, and we'll go outline, and then if time allows, we'll pick up where we left off and where we were reading in the book of Genesis. So, the 10 most significant discoveries in the field of biblical archaeology, and this is by John Currid. The Rosetta Stone. In 1798, Napoleon invaded Egypt. He brought with him a scientific team of scholars and draftsmen to survey the monuments of the land. The most important find of the expedition was the Rosetta Stone. It proved to be valuable as the key to deciphering ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. The stone dated to the period of Ptolemy and was inscribed in 3 scripts: Demotic, Greek, and hieroglyphic. The Greek, well known to scholars at the time, proved to be a translation of the ancient Egyptian language on the stone. Translation of hieroglyphics marked the beginning of the study of ancient Egyptian texts and grammar, and provided the basis for modern Egyptology studies. 2. The Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, shepherds stumbled upon a cave in a rugged, arid area of the western side of the Dead Sea. What they discovered was soon proclaimed the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century. Over the next few years, other similar remote caves in the area were found. What did these caves contain? Over 800 fragmentary documents, mainly consisting of Hebrew writings on leather, with a few on parchment, including fragments of 190 biblical scrolls. Most of these are small, containing no more than 1/10 of a book. However, a complete Isaiah scroll has been found. Almost every Old Testament book is present, and there are other writings valued by the community that dwelt in those caves. It appears the earliest scrolls date to the mid-3rd century BC, and most to the 1st or 2nd centuries BC. Perhaps the greatest contribution of this find is to our understanding of the transmission of the biblical text. It is encouraging to note that the differences are minimal between the Old Testament texts of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the various editions of the Hebrew text produced 1,000 years later and used today, involving the smallest textual details. The meaning of the text itself is not affected by these differences. 3. The Tel Dan inscription. In 1993, excavators at Tel Dan uncovered an inscription with the word BYD on it. They convincingly argued that the word means House of David and it dates to the 9th century BC. The inscription had been sealed by a later Assyrian destruction layer, firmly dated to 733 or between 733 and 722 BC. An ash layer is an archaeologist's dream. Anything sealed beneath it centuries BC. And from this period, the so-called House of David inscription must have come. Although some scholars have attempted to explain away the inscription by asserting BYTDWD is either a place name or a designation for a temple of a deity, it probably refers to the house of lineage of David, the second king of the United Monarchy, and arguably the most significant ruler in the history of Israel. We'll read more about him later. Additional evidence is the likely appearance of the term, I don't know what this word is necessarily, now I'm encouraged to research it, but again with the BYTDWD on the Mesha Stela Moabite stone, also dating to the 9th century BC. The Ketef Hinnom Scrolls. In 1979, Israeli archaeologist Gabriel Barkay was excavating a burial cave in Ketef Hinnom, just southwest of Jerusalem. The tomb was a typical late Iron Age burial structure. The typical Judean burial at this time took place in a rock-cut cave. When a person died, he was placed on a burial bench of a tomb, along with personal items such as vases, jewelry, or trinkets. Once the body decayed, the bones of the person were placed in a box beneath the burial bench. When the team began to excavate the box, they came upon two smaller silver scrolls. Since the scrolls were metal, the archaeologists had a difficult time unrolling and deciphering their text. They began with the larger of the two scrolls, which took 3 years to unroll. How about that for a job? When unrolled, it measured only 3 inches long. When they finished, they noticed the scroll was covered with very delicately etched characters. The first word they were able to decipher was the name Yahweh. After much work, they were able to read the entire scroll. It contained the priestly benediction from Numbers chapter 6. The smaller scroll also contained the benediction from Number 6. It took so long to unroll and decipher the scrolls that the material was not published until 1989. These two scrolls are relatively unknown, but they can be seen today in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. They are the earliest known citations of biblical texts in Hebrew. They predate the earliest Dead Sea Scrolls by more than 400 years, and are thus helpful in the matters of textual criticism. Many authors have argued that the priestly benediction was written after the exile, with its earliest date from the 4th century BC. Now we have physical examples from the benediction from the late 7th century BC. In addition, the discovery of 2 plaques with the same benediction in a buried site underscores the centrality of the priestly benediction to the religion of the Israelites. The Moabite stone. Number 5. In 1868, a missionary in Jerusalem found a stone tablet for sale that appeared to be from ancient times. The sellers broke the tablet into a number of pieces to sell them one at a time to make more money. Fortunately, a copy of this tablet was made prior to the break, and this copy is in the Louvre today. On the tablet is a text written in Moabite dating to the 9th century BC. It is perhaps a victory stone erected by King Mesha to commemorate his military achievements. The text begins, "I am Mesha, son of Chemosh, king of Moab." Prominent in the text is the king's version of a war fought with Israel in 850 BC, in which Moab revolted against King Jehoram of the northern kingdom of Israel soon after the death of Ahab. Of particular interest is that the Bible records the same incident in 2 Kings chapter 3. The two accounts differ in perspective. Mesha emphasizes his victories over Israel in capturing cities under Israelite control. The biblical writer, to the contrary, highlights Israel's successful counterattacks against the Moabites. Let me grab some water real quick here. Number 6. The Lachish Letters. In the 1930s, J.L. Starkey excavated the site of Lachish. He discovered a layer of debris heavily destroyed and burned with fire at the hands of the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar in 589-588 BC. ostraca in the burnt debris of a guard room between the inner and outer gates of the city. An ostracon is an inscription written in ink on pottery shards. Many of the ostraca were correspondence, although a few were from lists of names. The contents of the ostraca were fragmentary, and only a third of them are sufficiently preserved to be intelligible. The date of the ostraca is generally immediately prior to the destruction of Lachish by the Babylonians. A number of the letters are written by a man named Hoshea to a military commander named Yayash. The common interpretation is that Hoshea was the commander of a fortress outside Lachish, writing to Yaosh, the commander of Lachish. Other commentators believe that Hoshea was the military chief of Lachish and Yaosh, the high official in Jerusalem. One of the letters closes with the statement, "Let my lord know we are watching for signals of Lachish, according to the indications which my lord has given, for we cannot see Azekah." Hoshea was referring to signal fires. From one Judean city to another, and the context appears to be Babylonian assault soon to come. 7. The Epic of Gilgamesh. In 1872, George Smith announced he had discovered an Assyrian account of a flood among tablets stored in the British Museum from excavations of mid-7th century BC Nineveh. Called the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story comprises 12 tablets, with one tablet containing a tale of great deluge. The hero of the flood, a man named Utrapashim, relates in an episode to Gilgamesh. He explains how the god Yah warned him about an approaching judgment and told him to build a boat to save his life from watery onslaught. As the tale unfolds, the epic in some respects is nearly identical to the biblical narrative of Noah, Genesis 6 through 9. This discovery created quite a stir among biblical scholars of the 19th century, and even today scholars continue to puzzle over the debate the obvious parallels between the two. Number 8. Hezekiah's Tunnel. The most dependable water source for the city of Jerusalem during the Israelite settlement was the Gihon Spring. However, its location outside the city walls was problematic. During an attack or siege, the inhabitants were cut off from their vital water source. In 1867, explorer Charles Warren discovered a vertical shaft cut through bedrock, allowing the people of Jerusalem to reach waters of Gihon Spring from behind the city walls. This shaft was probably built by the Jebusites and may be how David's soldiers captured the city from them in 2 Samuel chapter 5 verses 6 through 8. A new water system employing part of the earlier one was built by Hezekiah near the end of the 8th century BC due to the Assyrian military threat. Hezekiah's tunnel sloped gently away from the Gihon Spring to allow water to flow from it to the pool of Siloam inside the city walls. Hezekiah's tunnel was cut by two teams digging toward each other by opposite ends. It was not chiseled in a straight line, but was serpentine due to its frequent shifts in terrain. As the two teams made adjustments as they drew near to each other and heard picks from the other team, an inscription of 20 feet from the Siloam pool has been discovered that describes the meaning of the two cutting teams. Number 9. A crucified man at Givat Hamidvar. We are well aware of the Roman methods of crucifixion of the 1st century AD, not only from the written records, but also from the remains of a crucified man discovered at Givat Hamidvar, a site just outside of Jerusalem. The cross consisted of two parts, the upright bar, called the Stipes Crucis, and the horizontal bar, called the Patibulum. The crucified man was placed with his back over the Stipes Crucis, and his hands were nailed to the Patibulum. According to archaeologists, the nails must have been driven through the wrist because the palms could not have supported the man's weight. He was affixed to the cross by his feet in a way different than was commonly thought. The Roman executioner made a crude rectangular frame us further insight into Roman crucifixions. That there's kind of a morbid crossover between what we've been doing in the anatomy series and then what we've been reading in the Bible. I can't even imagine what level of pain that would prompt. It's horrific to think about. Number 10, Ugaritic texts. A great majority of Canaanite texts come from the site of Ugarit, or modern-day Ras Shamra, on the northern coast of Syria on the Mediterranean Sea. Ugarit was a prominent Canaanite city-state of the 2nd millennium BC. Major excavations have taken place at the site since 1929. A most important find at Ugarit are hundreds of texts discovered in the palace and temple areas. More than 1,500 of these tablets have been published. Ugarit reached its height in the 15th to 13th centuries BC, the period in which written literature at the site flourished. The city met its final fate at the hands of Mediterranean enemies, who destroyed the site around 1200 BC. The importance of the Ugaritic texts is the material they provide concerning Canaanite religion. Their mythic texts help us understand the religious context of the Old Testament, including many parallels between Canaanite and Israelite religious practices. In addition, the languages of Ugaritic and Hebrew are quite similar, and thus Ugaritic provides insight into the development and grammar of Hebrew. Interesting. So, 10 significant biblical archaeological discoveries. I thought everyone might find that interesting. It's always cool whenever what you're reading is supplemented by something that's found in the real world. And then there's plenty of reference guides, and we may dig into some of those. I mean, there's some of them that are mentioned that we already talked about, like the Gilgamesh epic. What else do we see in here? Some pyramid texts here. Again, this may be an observation for a different time. I think I showed this map before, the economy of ancient Palestine. So you've got grain in the yellow area, fruit trees in the green, cedar trees are a big deal. You hear those referenced a lot in scripture, so the more we read, the more you'll hear it. And then it looks like construction timber is in these areas here. A comparison between the Hebrew calendar compared to the modern Gregorian calendar. There's been talk about changing over daylight savings time, and just what a mess that might be. Can you imagine if they were to make any changes to the modern calendar? Your meeting invites would never be the same if you had to struggle to even just keep up with them to begin with. And then, yeah, we've got an Old Testament timeline here that I'll go through real quick. The following dates, which are all BC, are close approximations based on correlating dates between the Bible and other ancient Near Eastern sources, largely from Assyrian accession lists, Babylonian king lists, or Egyptian historical sources. Often dates can be confirmed between the Assyrian and Babylonian empires by narratives recording contacts between these two countries. And then from patriarchs to judges, that's 2166 to 1030 BC. So you have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the birth of Moses, the Exodus, led by Moses, the desert wanderings, also with Moses, the entrance into Canaan after the death of Moses, and then the period of the judges, and that comes after the death of Joshua, who takes over for Moses. All of this we'll get to, but just interesting to walk through there. And then the United Monarchy starts with the first king of Israel, King Saul, who it looks like he reigned 20 to 40 years. Well, not entirely certain on the exact duration. It says numerals relating to Saul's age and length of reign may be missing in the Hebrew text. David to courtesy of Cyrus of Persia. The first return of exiles to Jerusalem, the building of the temple begins, and that takes place with Nehemiah. And then the temple is completed during the reign of King Darius. Esther is in the palace of Xerxes, and the second return of exiles to Jerusalem under Ezra, and the third return of exiles to Jerusalem under Nehemiah. So maybe, I misspoke. The temple building begins, but Nehemiah brought it home in 445. And then one last thing here that we'll read through. It's just an introduction to Genesis here real quick, what we can expect the rest of the book. So far we're through chapter 21, I think. I'd have to go back and double check. Let me look, actually. We're through 19, so we're going to pick up here Abraham and Abimelech in chapter 20. But there's the primeval history, God's creation, Earth's first people, Adam's descendants, Noah's descendants, the descendants of Noah's sons, Shem's descendants, and right now we're in the thick of patriarchal history. So we're on chapter 20, so we're in the early part of the patriarchal history. Terah's descendants, we're in the mix of that. Isaac's descendants, so Isaac is about to be born, we're almost there. And then Jacob's descendants come after that, and Jacob is the founder of Israel itself. And it says the Near East at the time of Genesis. The book of Genesis describes events in ancient Near East from the beginnings of civilization to the relocation of Jacob or Israel's family in Egypt. The stories of Genesis are set among the oldest nations in the world, including Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, and Elam. So kind of modern day, here's modern day Turkey, here's Saudi Arabia, here's kind of Iraq, Iran in this mix here, and then here's modern day Israel over here, and of course Egypt hasn't changed. But we've been going for a while now, so we'll go ahead and call it a stop here, and we will pick up in chapter 20 next time, which will have the birth of Isaac and the sacrifice of Isaac, or is he sacrificed? If you know, you know, but if not, stick around and find out. As always, thank you for taking the time to come spend time with me here and for listening. I hope this is something that you enjoy. Enjoy the last few days of the year. May 2025 be your best year yet. A year full of blessings, and thank you for spending this time with me. Hope you enjoy. If you want to see more, please subscribe, like, and subscribe.